Israel is among the main promoters of the terrorist war imposed on Syria. Damascus has stressed that over the last 10 years, Tel Aviv has not ceased to offer its support to extremist groups operating on Syrian soil, as well as launching airstrikes on the country. Our correspondent Hisham Wanas has the story.
In the last 2 years, Israel committed more than 200 airstrikes against Syria. The last one, which is the 7th of its kind so far this year, took place on Tuesday night, March 16th, with missiles launched from the occupied Syrian Golan against the southern perimeter of Damascus, and, like the previous attacks, it was countered by the air defense of the Syrian Arab Army. These are failed attempts to save the defeated terrorist gangs, which will be answered in due course, says the government and citizens of the Arab country.
Syria is ready to respond to any aggression, and the Syrian Arab Army is prepared to face Israeli aggression against Syrian territory as part of the war against terrorism and its sponsors, especially the Zionist entity, the main sponsor of terrorism in Syria.
Damascus denounces that the Israeli entity since the beginning of the terrorist war in 2011 has supplied huge amounts of money, weapons and ammunition to extremist groups that promote violent confrontation in Syria. This was confirmed when the Syrian army discovered several warehouses of Israeli-made weapons and food in the liberated areas in southern Syria, near the occupied Syrian Golan.
The Israeli aggressions take place in the context of continuous logistic support of the Israeli entity to the terrorist groups operating in Syria to destabilize the whole region. There are intelligence reports that said that Israeli entity reactivated terrorist cells that attack positions of the Syrian Arab Army in the southern region of Syria.
The Israeli entity employs all means to prevent the total defeat of the terrorists operating on Syrian soil. Besides the continuous bombing and the supply of weapons and ammunition, the Israeli occupation troops transfer wounded extremists to occupied Palestine for treatment and then return them to the battlefields in Syria. Hostile practices that Damascus claims will not prevent the inevitable victory of the Syrian Arab Army against terrorism and its sponsors.